You have spent most of your life feeling like you are not quite enough, not in the loud, obvious way, not the kind where someone sits you down and tells you directly that you are lacking. The quiet kind. The kind where you are sitting in a room full of people, you already know the answer before anyone finishes the question, and you say nothing. Because the last time you spoke up, the room went silent in a way that felt less like respect and more like confusion. And so you learned. You learned to downplay what you notice, to soften what you understand, to pretend not to see the patterns that leap out at you like neon signs in a dark room. Because every time you let someone glimpse how your mind actually works, they looked at you differently. Not with admiration, with distance. If you have ever felt this, if you have ever suspected in some quiet corner of yourself that you might be sharper than you give yourself credit for, but have spent years hiding it, then what you are about to hear might be the most honest explanation of something you have always quietly sensed about yourself. Because psychology tells a completely different story about what intelligence actually looks like. It does not look like a high score on a test. It does not look like being the loudest person in the room. It does not look like having all the answers. In fact, many of the most intelligent people alive walk through their lives completely convinced they are average. Because the very signs that prove their intelligence are the same signs that make them feel different, isolated, and permanently out of step with everyone around them. And the seventh sign we will reach before this ends is the one that changes everything. The first sign is one that most intelligent people feel for years, but never find the words for. You have probably experienced it hundreds of times without knowing what to call it. You are at a social gathering and everyone around you seems to be enjoying themselves effortlessly. They laugh, trade small stories, move through the room with an ease that looks almost choreographed. But you are there and you are not there. Part of you is watching the entire scene from a distance even while standing in the middle of it. You smile at the right moments. You participate well enough. But underneath there is a quiet, persistent sense that you are observing life more than inhabiting it. Like a documentary filmmaker who is always behind the camera, always capturing, always watching, but never fully inside the frame. Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski spent decades studying highly intelligent individuals and identified what he called intellectual overexcitability, a heightened cognitive activation that causes certain people to process reality with an intensity that most people never experience. Your brain does not passively receive information. It analyzes, questions, compares, and synthesizes constantly, automatically, without your permission. And what this creates is a gap. When you are surrounded by people who process the world at a surface level, you feel like a deep-sea creature that has accidentally surfaced. The pressure is wrong. The light is wrong. The way people communicate, the unspoken agreement to stay shallow, feels like a language you were never taught. This is not arrogance. You are not looking down on anyone. Most highly intelligent people spend their lives genuinely confused about why connection feels so difficult. They assume something is wrong with them, but nothing is wrong. Your brain simply processes in higher resolution. And when you are a high-resolution mind in a standard definition world, the loneliness you feel is not a flaw in you. It is a mismatch in depth. And that difference, quiet as it is, changes everything about how you move through the world. The second sign is the one that makes intelligent people believe they are fragile when they are actually running a more powerful engine than anyone around them. You know this experience. You go to a social event and within the first hour you feel like you have run a marathon while everyone around you seems energized, refueled, ready for more. You come home needing silence, real silence, not background noise, not music, nothing. And then you watch other people go from the party to the after party, from back-to-back meetings straight into dinner, and you wonder quietly and with some shame whether you are simply built wrong for the demands of ordinary life. Here is what neuroscience actually tells us. Your brain is not weaker. It is processing more information per second than the average person's brain processes in an entire hour. Every social situation you enter, your mind is running a multi-layered analysis completely in the background, reading micro-expressions, tracking inconsistencies between words and tone, comparing what is being said against what you know to be true, projecting where the interaction is heading based on dozens of similar moments stored deep in memory. Cognitive load theory explains exactly what is happening here. Every human brain has a finite processing capacity, but the rate at which different brains consume that capacity varies enormously. A highly intelligent person processes more deeply and across more dimensions simultaneously, which means they reach cognitive saturation faster. You are not weak for needing to retreat and recover, you are full. There is a profound difference between those two things. The same cognitive depth that drains you in a crowded room is the exact same depth that allows you to understand things that others will never see. The cost and the gift are inseparable. They come from the same place inside you. The third sign is the one that has probably gotten you labeled as difficult more times than you can count. Someone gives you an explanation. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. It satisfies everyone else in the room. But inside you, something will not settle. Not because you want to argue, not because you are trying to prove anything, but because you can feel it. There is a gap, a piece missing, an assumption that was never examined, a conclusion reached too quickly, and so you ask the follow-up question, and sometimes another after that, and you watch the person's expression shift from mild curiosity to mild annoyance to something closer to defensiveness. You were not trying to corner them, you were trying to understand. But they experienced your questions as an attack. Psychologists call this need for cognition a stable personality trait describing how strongly a person is driven toward effortful thinking. Research from the University of Heidelberg found that individuals high in need for cognition process arguments more systematically, resist past persuasion by weak evidence, and show greater activity in the prefrontal cortex during reasoning tasks. Their brains literally refuse to take shortcuts. And here is the paradox that no one ever explains to you. In a world that rewards speed and confident, quick decisions, your unwillingness to accept a shallow answer makes you look slow or overly complicated. But what is actually happening is that your brain is doing precisely what intelligent brains are designed to do. It is thinking, really thinking, not performing thinking, not rushing to a conclusion to appear decisive, actually working through the problem until the true answer emerges. You were not built to skim the surface, you were built to dive beneath it, and the people who skim will always finish first. But they will also miss everything that lives underneath. The fourth sign is one of the most psychologically complex, and one that almost no one ever discusses openly. You notice things you were never meant to notice. The half-second hesitation before someone says they are happy for you. The subtle shift in energy the moment a certain person enters the room. The contradiction between what someone is saying and what their body is quietly broadcasting. You see the insecurity beneath the confidence, the grief beneath the smile, the hidden motive beneath the kind words. And then comes the part that weighs on you most. You feel guilty about it. Guilty because you know something you were never told. Guilty because you can see through a mask that someone is working very hard to keep in place. Guilty because your perception feels almost invasive, like reading a diary that was left open on a table by accident. You did not ask for this information. You did not go searching for it. Your brain simply delivered it, and now you have to carry it in silence. This experience has roots in two systems operating simultaneously inside you. The first is pattern recognition, your brain's ability to detect inconsistencies between what is presented and what is actually true beneath the surface. Highly intelligent people have faster and more accurate pattern recognition than average. The second is what psychologists call affective empathy, the capacity to not just understand but actually feel what another person is experiencing. When these two systems operate together, you do not simply detect that someone is hiding pain. You feel their pain while simultaneously knowing they are hiding it, and that creates a very specific kind of moral tension that most people never have to carry. The guilt you feel is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that your conscience is fully intact and working exactly as it should. You see clearly and you care deeply. That combination is genuinely rare. It is also genuinely heavy, but it has never been a flaw. The fifth sign takes us somewhere most people never think to look. Back to where you first began. Think back to your childhood for a moment. How many times were you told you were mature for your age, an old soul, wise beyond your years? Adults gravitated toward you naturally. You understood things, family tension, emotional undercurrents, unspoken truths, long before anyone thought to explain them to you. And at the time it felt like a compliment. You were proud of it the way children are proud of being treated like small adults. But here is what no one told you then, and what most people never learn. Psychologists call this asynchronous development. a pattern that appears consistently in highly intelligent children, where cognitive development significantly outpaces emotional and social development. Your mind understood adult-sized concepts years before your heart was equipped to carry them. You process complex emotional information with a child's coping tools. You absorb the full weight of adult realities through a child's nervous system. Psychologist Leta Hollingworth, who spent her career studying gifted children in the early 20th century, observed something she called the early awareness of ultimate concerns. Death, injustice, suffering, the vastness of everything unknown. While other children were simply playing, you were quietly processing questions that most adults spend their entire lives carefully avoiding, and now, as an adult, you carry a fatigue that feels older than your years. Not physical tiredness, something deeper and harder to name. An existential weight that comes from having run a heavy mind for longer than you can remember. You did not peak early and burn out. You simply started earlier, and you have been running further and deeper than anyone around you ever stopped to acknowledge. The sixth sign is perhaps the most cognitively sophisticated of all, and paradoxically the one that makes you feel the least certain about everything. Most people need the world to be simple. They need clear villains and clear heroes. They find real comfort in certainty even when that certainty is built entirely on an incomplete picture. But you cannot do this, not because you lack conviction, because your mind simply refuses to ignore the parts of reality that do not fit neatly into a single clean story. You can understand exactly why someone hurt you, the wound that first shaped them, the fear that drove them, the context that explains their behavior, and still hold them fully accountable for the damage they caused. You can see the genuine flaws in an argument you agree with, and the real merit in an argument you oppose. You can believe something deeply and simultaneously understand with equal clarity why a thoughtful and reasonable person might believe the exact opposite. Developmental psychologists call this dialectical thinking, the ability to hold opposing ideas at the same time and recognize that truth almost always lives somewhere in the tension between them rather than cleanly on either side. Research consistently links this capacity with higher intellectual functioning, and in a world that demands you pick a side and defend it without hesitation, your refusal to collapse complexity into false simplicity can look like indecision. But certainty is cheap. Anyone can be certain. What requires genuine intelligence is the willingness to keep thinking honestly when everything around you is telling you to stop and just choose. And now we arrive at the seventh sign, the one that is the hardest to admit even to yourself, the one that lives in the quietest part of you and has never fully left. Somewhere beneath your daily routines and your comfortable explanations, you know that you are capable of more than you are currently allowing yourself to do. Not in an arrogant way, in a quiet, almost buried way, a knowing that surfaces in unguarded moments when you are not performing or pretending or managing how you appear to others. You have glimpsed it. In moments when you lost yourself completely in something and produced work that surprised even you. When someone whose judgment you respected looked at what you created and said genuinely that it was extraordinary. When you felt for one brief evening what it might feel like to operate without holding yourself back. And then you pulled away from it. You did not pursue the opportunity as fully as you could have. You told yourself you were being realistic, humble, practical. But underneath those reasonable-sounding explanations was something else, something closer to fear. Psychologist Abraham Maslow called this the Jonah complex, the fear not of failure but of one's own greatness, the quiet, persistent evasion of full potential. He observed across decades of studying human motivation that many people are not afraid of falling short. They are afraid of what it would mean to truly commit, to give everything, and still discover it was not enough. Because if you hold back, you can always protect yourself with the story that you could have done it if you had truly tried. That story keeps the possibility alive without ever requiring you to risk it. And here is the part that Maslow understood most clearly. The more intelligent you are, the more vividly you can see your own potential, and the more terrifying that potential becomes, because you can see with painful precision exactly what realizing it would cost. The sacrifice, the exposure, the vulnerability of putting something genuinely true into the world and living with whatever the world decides to do with it. A less perceptive person might move forward without ever counting that cost. You count it immediately, completely. And sometimes that counting is exactly what holds you still. But here is what that fear is quietly telling you. whether you have been ready to hear it or not. If you were truly limited, truly average, truly incapable of more, there would be nothing to fear. You would have no potential to run from. The fear itself is the evidence. There is something real inside you that you have not yet allowed to fully exist in the world, and that thing has been waiting quietly for longer than you realize. You feel like an outsider because you process reality at a depth that most people around you simply do not reach. You exhaust faster because your brain is doing more genuine work in 1 hour than most people's brains do across an entire day. You cannot accept shallow answers because your mind was built for depth and depth alone. You feel guilt for what you perceive because you combine sharp pattern recognition with real empathy. And that combination is both the heaviest gift and the rarest one. You carry a fatigue older than your years because you began processing the heaviest questions of existence when you were still a child with no tools to hold them. You sit with contradiction without breaking because you have reached a level of thinking that most people never access. And you are afraid of your own potential, not because you lack courage, but because you can see with absolute clarity exactly what you are capable of and exactly what it would require to finally stop hiding from it. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. They never were. They are signs that your mind has been functioning at a depth the world never quite learned to see or name. And maybe that is the only thing that ever needed to be said.